Myth number 1. The Dark Ages were completely dark and ignorant. The term Dark Ages often evokes an era of intellectual stagnation and cultural decline in Europe following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. This period, roughly from 500 to 1000 AD, is frequently portrayed as a time devoid of progress or learning. This portrayal is largely inaccurate. While parts of Western Europe faced significant upheaval, monasteries served as vital centers for preserving classical texts and fostering scholarship. Innovations in agriculture, such as the heavy plow and crop rotation, improved living conditions. Simultaneously, the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world experienced golden ages of scientific, artistic, and philosophical advancement, far from darkness. The concept of a dark age was largely coined by Renaissance scholars. They sought to highlight their own era's perceived rebirth of classical learning by contrasting it with the preceding centuries, which they denigrated as ignorant. This mischaracterization has persisted, overshadowing the genuine achievements and complex developments that occurred across various cultures during this extensive historical period. Christopher Columbus proved Earth round.
A common narrative credits Christopher Columbus with proving the Earth was spherical during his transatlantic voyages, overcoming widespread belief in a flat Earth. The educated elite of Europe had known the Earth was round for centuries, a fact understood since ancient Greek scholars like Eratosthenes had accurately measured its circumference. Columbus's primary error was not in believing the Earth was round, but in drastically underestimating its size, leading him to believe Asia was much closer than it actually was. This myth likely arose from romanticized accounts of exploration, positioning Columbus as a solitary visionary challenging dogmatic ignorance. It simplified complex scientific understanding into a dramatic narrative. The story inflates Columbus's scientific contribution while falsely portraying medieval understanding of cosmology. Myth number 3. Cleopatra was Egyptian. Cleopatra VII Philopator, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt, is widely perceived as an ethnically Egyptian pharaoh. Cleopatra was of Macedonian Greek descent, a direct descendant of Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's generals. Her dynasty maintained its Greek identity, often through incestuous marriages to preserve the purity of their Macedonian lineage. While she did learn to speak Egyptian, making her unique among her dynasty, her ethnic background was Hellenistic. Her rule over Egypt and her iconic status within Egyptian history naturally led to the assumption of Egyptian ethnicity. Popular culture often reinforces this visual. This misconception often obscures the complex Hellenistic cultural blend of Ptolemaic Egypt and Cleopatra's own political maneuvering within a Greek-dominated court.
Myth number 4. The Great Wall visible from space. It is frequently claimed that China's Great Wall is the only man-made structure visible to the naked eye from Earth's orbit. This is a persistent myth debunked by astronauts and satellite imagery. From low Earth orbit, the Great Wall is no more visible than many highways or other large structures. It is relatively thin, roughly the same color as the surrounding terrain, and lacks distinctive features that make it stand out against the vastness of the Earth. The myth gained traction in the early 20th century and was popularized by early space travel narratives, despite photographic and first-hand evidence to the contrary. While a testament to engineering, the myth overstates the wall's visibility and contributes to a romanticized, rather than factual, understanding of its scale from space. Myth number 5. Medieval people thought Earth flat.
The notion that medieval Europeans widely believed the Earth was flat is a pervasive misconception, often cited as evidence of the era's supposed ignorance. From the time of ancient Greece, educated people throughout Europe, including during the Middle Ages, understood the Earth to be spherical. Evidence for this understanding appears in medieval art, texts, and architecture. Cathedrals, for example, often incorporated globe motifs into their designs. The debate was largely over the existence of antipodes, not the Earth's shape. This myth was largely fabricated in the 19th century by writers like Washington Irving, who sensationalized historical accounts, and later used by figures such as Andrew Dixon White to critique religious dogma.
It inaccurately portrays the intellectual achievements of the medieval period and creates a false narrative of scientific progress needing to overcome widespread religious fundamentalism on this particular point. Why myths persist. Historical misconceptions, once ingrained, often prove remarkably resilient, spreading through generations despite evidence to the contrary. Understanding why these myths persist reveals much about human psychology and the mechanisms of information transfer. Several factors contribute to the endurance of historical inaccuracies. Propaganda, such as Roman smears against their enemies, has historically shaped narratives. Nationalism often fabricates or exaggerates heroic origin stories. Pop culture, through film and literature, frequently prioritizes dramatic storytelling over factual accuracy. Cognitive biases, where people favor narratives that confirm existing beliefs or are simply more compelling, also play a significant role. These forces combine to create a landscape where captivating stories often take precedence over verifiable facts, perpetuating errors and distorting collective memory. For example, Hollywood's depiction of the American Wild West frequently embellishes or invents scenarios that bear little resemblance to historical reality.
Myth number 6. King John signed Magna Carta to protect common people's rights. The Magna Carta, signed by King John of England in 1215, is widely celebrated as a foundational document for universal rights and liberties, particularly for the common person. The charter was not a benevolent act for all subjects. It was a document forced upon King John by disgruntled feudal barons whose primary aim was to limit royal power over themselves and protect their own feudal rights and privileges. The document mentions free men, but this referred to a small percentage of the population, not common laborers or serfs. Over centuries, later legal thinkers and activists reinterpreted the Magna Carta, broadening its principles to apply to wider populations. This reinterpretation, rather than the original intent, forms the basis of its modern significance. While its legacy undoubtedly influenced the development of democratic rights, the myth misrepresents its immediate context and original beneficiaries, obscuring its feudal origins.
The infamous Salem witch trials of colonial Massachusetts are often visually associated with the burning of accused witches at the stake. In colonial America, individuals convicted of witchcraft were typically punished by hanging, not burning. Of the 19 people executed during the Salem witch trials in 1692-1693, all were hanged. Burning was a punishment for heresy in some parts of Europe, but not generally for witchcraft in England or its American colonies. This misconception likely stems from the broader European history of witch hunts, where burning was a more common form of execution, and its dramatic appeal in popular culture. The myth perpetuates an inaccurate image of early American justice and conflates colonial practices with those of continental Europe. A comforting anecdote often shared is that Albert Einstein, the renowned physicist, struggled or even failed mathematics in school, implying that academic struggles do not preclude future genius. Einstein did not fail mathematics. Records show he excelled in mathematics, consistently topping his classes. While he did struggle with some subjects he found uninteresting, his mathematical abilities were evident from a young age. This myth may stem from a misunderstanding of his later academic choices or a desire to humanize a towering intellectual figure by attributing relatable struggles. While intended to be encouraging, the myth distorts Einstein's actual academic record and undermines the recognition of his early aptitude for complex subjects.
Abner Doubleday, a Union Army general during the American Civil War, is widely credited with inventing the game of baseball in Cooperstown, New York in 1839. There is no credible historical evidence to support this claim. Doubleday himself never mentioned inventing baseball, and his records place him at West Point in 1839, not Cooperstown. Baseball evolved from older bat and ball games like rounders, with rules gradually formalized in the mid-19th century. The myth was largely fabricated in 1907 by the Spalding Commission, a committee formed to investigate baseball's origins. They sought an American origin story, and Doubleday, an admired military figure, fit the patriotic narrative they wished to construct. This corporate myth created a false origin story for America's national pastime, obscuring the sport's more organic and evolutionary development. Let them eat cake.
The phrase "qu'ils mangent de la brioche," often translated as "let them eat cake," is famously attributed to Marie Antoinette, symbolizing her supposed callous disregard for the starving French populace before the French Revolution. There is no historical evidence that Marie Antoinette ever uttered these words. The anecdote appears in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's autobiographical Confessions, written around 1766, when Marie Antoinette was only 10 years old and not yet in France. Rousseau attributed the quote to "a great princess."
The quote became associated with Marie Antoinette years later, likely as a piece of anti-monarchical propaganda designed to fuel public resentment against the queen and the aristocracy during the escalating revolutionary fervor. The myth solidified her image as an out-of-touch, insensitive ruler, contributing significantly to her negative public perception and the revolutionary sentiment that ultimately led to her execution. The classical sculptures of ancient Greece and Rome are typically admired for their pristine white marble, influencing centuries of Western art with an aesthetic of pure, unadorned form. These ancient statues were originally painted with vibrant, often elaborate colors. Scientific analysis using UV light, X-rays, and chemical tests has revealed traces of pigments, indicating that classical sculptures, architectural elements, and temples were far from monochromatic. The pigments faded over millennia due to exposure to the elements, leaving behind the bare marble that was discovered and admired by later Renaissance and neoclassical artists. These artists then propagated the white marble aesthetic, believing it to be the original intent. This widespread misconception has deeply shaped Western art history and aesthetics, creating a largely inaccurate picture of classical antiquity's visual culture.
Myth number 12. Vikings were solely brutal raiders who never settled. The popular image of Vikings often portrays them exclusively as bloodthirsty warriors and destructive raiders, plundering monasteries and terrorizing coastal communities with no interest in permanent settlement. While Viking raids were certainly a historical reality, they represent only one aspect of a complex culture. The vast majority of Vikings were peaceful traders, skilled farmers, and intrepid explorers. They established extensive trade networks, founded settlements in places like Iceland, Greenland, and parts of North America, and integrated into existing societies across Europe. The enduring brutal raider narrative was heavily influenced by Anglo-Saxon chroniclers, who, as victims of these raids, naturally focused on the violence and destruction. Their accounts overshadowed the more mundane but prevalent aspects of Viking life. This one-sided portrayal distorts the rich and multifaceted history of the Norse people, underplaying their roles as innovators, colonizers, and crucial contributors to the medieval global economy.